But that 40 years ago, I remember vividly being in a really lovely place called Secaucus, New Jersey, right outside New York City, and going and standing in line, not on opening night, because nobody knew really when this movie came out that it was going to be so amazing and wonderful as it was. But shortly after, the word of mouth got out, and the way you bought tickets back then was you stood in line and you went into the movie theater. And it wasn't like the multiplexes of today. And I can remember standing in line with a lot of people, Sarah and I, to watch this movie called Star Wars. And then we went back and we watched it again and again and again. It was an extraordinary, obviously, cultural event. Well, it's been 40 years since that movie first came out. And in honor of Star Wars, I thought today that I would talk for a moment about what I would call Bar Wars, Return of the Jedi, because there are some enduring lessons, certainly from the Star Wars universe, that I think actually apply to the bar exam. I'm not quite sure how George Lucas got his philosophy pulled together, but it's a pretty wise world philosophy that could be applied to a lot of things. And I think it does apply to what bar takers are going through at this particular stage. As I said earlier, we're kind of approaching that stage before the upcoming exam when a lot of people get really frantic and panicked, and they start to feel like they're hitting the wall. They're feeling really kind of discouraged by so much of the process. I describe in broad terms that all of those reactions as being the lies of the dark side. These are the things that Darth Vader whispers in your ear, and they are lies. They're not true, and yet it's easy to believe them. And I've identified 4 lies that I think bar takers are susceptible to right now. Now, there are many other things that I think are untrue that people fall victim to at different times in their study and in different circumstances. But right now, prior to the exam, a couple months out before the exam, certainly, I think that there are 4 big lies. And then I think there are countervailing truths. You might say they come from the Force, or maybe from the Jedi, or maybe, I don't know, my ears are big. I don't know if I qualify as Yoda. But nonetheless, there are some truths, and I want to share this with you as well. So let's jump into the first of them. The first lie from the dark side is that in order to be successful on the exam, you just need to do better at what you were doing before. Another way to keep this in context are the people that say, what we want to do is just a better way of writing using IRAC. There's a better IRAC, or there's a better whatever it might be. This is really silly. IRAC as a writing style either works or it doesn't work. There's no better in IRAC. It's a lie. Now, I think you could make a compelling case that when 90% plus of all bar takers in the country use IRAC as their writing style, and the pass rate across the country out of the last exam is roughly 33 to 35%, I think we can make a pretty compelling case that IRAC is not a very effective writing style. You might disagree with that, but nonetheless, I think that's what the numbers empirically tell us. Given that, if someone says to you, well, let's just do a better job of IRACing, what does that mean? How do you do that? What possibly could that be helpful, or how could that be helpful to anyone? And I think the answer is it simply isn't. That there is no better way to do something that doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So what's the truth from the Force here? Well, the truth is you need to do something different. You need to, in this case, write differently. Instead of trying to spot issues, you need to write about disputes and conflicts. You need to show how you analyze using the law, not how much law you've memorized. Now, that is not a better form of IRAC. That is something entirely different. And if you've been an IRAC writer post-law school, and I recognize that virtually everyone used IRAC in law school, but if you've used IRAC on the bar exam, well, the reality is that you probably have had less than optimum success. And if you used it successfully at some point in the past, I would venture to say that today it would not be as effective as it used to be, because the bar examiners aren't rewarding that writing style. They're not rewarding people that memorize and recite these particular rules. Therefore, doing a better job of memorizing and reciting rules isn't going to be effective. So you might say to yourself, well, I'm going to spend an extra 100 hours memorizing. I'm going to do a better job of memorizing. But the basic concept doesn't work. And therefore, there is no better way to do it. You need to do something different. Now, for those of you in our course, you've already made that step off the plank, if you will, from just doing a better job of something that didn't work before to doing something that does work. But for those of you that are listening to this later and are thinking, well, I'll just do a better job of studying than I did before, doing the same old things, you're in for a rude surprise. It generally doesn't work. And the bar statistics bear that out. It's a lie when you're told to just do a better job with IRAC or a better job memorizing or a better job reciting rules. Not good, doesn't work. The second lie I think that bar takers hear from the dark side is my equivalent of the Death Star. You remember the Death Star, big, dum, 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 big, heavy John Williams music behind it. The Death Star looks pretty impenetrable to me, right? And in the bar exam, the Death Star is this concept that you have to know everything to pass the exam. You've heard it. You got to know everything to pass. You got to know the law cold to pass the bar exam. What? That is completely absurd. It is totally ridiculous. It makes no sense on any level, and yet people say it and believe it all the time. Well, why do they do that? Well, I think in part because if we make it look like the Death Star, then when we, crash and burn, we say, well, it was a Death Star. I mean, man, I just had a little jet, a jet fighter here against the Death Star. No way. I can't possibly win that battle. And we protect ourselves emotionally. But it's not true. It's a lie. The bar exam is not the Death Star, and you don't need to know everything to be successful in order to pass. What's the answer here? What's the truth? Well, you have to find the opening. You remember in Star Wars, the opening? It's just a little tiny spot in the Death Star where they can get in and get down into the reactor core. And if they can find that one tiny flaw, then they can blow up the entire big Death Star. In a sense, that's what the bar exam is about. Getting in and finding the opening, finding the dispute in the question, finding what the law is that turns that question on its head, that makes it easy to unlock it. When you have done that, then you're successful. But if you pound on the outside, if you try to break it open with brute force, if you try to write 2,500 word, 60-minute essays, you're not going to be successful in most cases. And this attempt to use brute force against the Death Star of the bar exam typically doesn't work for people. There's a great line in Rogue One that says, rebellions are built on hope. I love that because I think this is a rebellion when it comes to the bar exam. I think we're part of a rebellion, and the rebellion is built on the hope that you don't have to go out and learn everything, know everything, memorize everything. You simply find the one opening and you shoot through that opening. What's the opening? It's the ability to identify where the disputes are and where the problem is, and then get to that and show how you'd analyze it. If you can do that, you win the exam, you blow up the Death Star, and you get to be an attorney. There could be some mixed metaphors there, but you get the idea. All right. The third lie I think bar takers get from the dark side is that if you fail the exam, that means that you are personally a failure, right? You can hear Darth Vader kind of whispering in your ear, come to the dark side. I'll give you power. You're a failure without this, right? You're a failure. You can't make it. You can't win. Isn't that what the evil emperor always does? They always try to tell the hero that they're not good enough or strong enough without their evil powers behind them. And it's such a tragedy. It's such a tragedy in the bar because what happens is the bar takers go and they take this exam, they get a failing result, and suddenly, somehow, that becomes an indictment of who they are. I can't be good enough. I'm not good enough. I'm a failure at what I'm doing. And it's such a mistake to take that approach. Well, what should you do? What's the truth from the force? The truth is that to get to the point, even the point of failing the bar exam, you had to be a success. You had to be a winner. I mean, think about it. You had to get out of high school. You had to get into college. You had to get out of college and take an LSAT. You had to do well enough on that to get into a law school. You had to get through 3 or 4 or more years of law school. You had to, if you're a foreign attorney, you had to get an LLM, or you had to graduate law school in your home country. You had to come to the US. You had to come here. You had to qualify to sit for the exam. Are you kidding me? What in the world would make you think you're a failure? You're only a failure when you start comparing yourself to other people that you think, just magically showed up and they, sleptwalked through the process and they became lawyers. And I'm not saying that there aren't some of those people, but that is not the norm. Trust me, it's not anywhere near the norm these days. The people that pass the bar work really, really hard. But many of those people who passed the bar failed previously, and they did not consider themselves to be failures. You know, one of the things that we do that I love is that I get the chance to interview successful bar takers from our course after results come out. And we've just done a series of those, and they're up on our webpage under the case studies. And I really encourage you to check those out, because virtually all of those folks will tell you that at some point they had setbacks, whether they were personal or professional or both, related to the bar or not. But instead of believing that that made them failures, they simply pressed on. They found the opening. They found the vulnerability in the Death Star, and they went for it. They followed the plan that we were giving them. They didn't try to do a better job of the things that didn't work. They did something different. You see how it all comes together? And giving themselves the permission to try those new things, to find the approaches and the secrets, can't be done if you keep saying to yourself, I'm a failure. There is not a connection between failing the exam and being a failure. They're two entirely separate things. You can fail the exam and be a success in everything that you are doing in your life. Your kids think the world of you, your spouse, your business, the people in your community. There are so many ways that you can be a hero, even if you haven't passed the bar exam. Passing the bar exam simply is the opportunity to put the icing on the cake for many people. And so I want to make sure that you don't be seduced by that lie from the dark side that you're a failure. When you start hearing that, I want you to know that that's the enemy. And it might be an enemy that you call Satan. It might be an enemy that you call the bar examiners. It might be an enemy that you call family members. It might be an enemy that you call Darth Vader. It doesn't matter. It's the same enemy, the one that tells you you're not good enough. It's just not true. And then the last lie from the dark side, this one makes me nuts. This one says you just have to follow the crowd. You should just be another foot soldier. You should be one of the stormtroopers, totally undistinguishable from anyone else, wearing your stormtrooper uniform and your special equipment and marching, rigidly like this and following the crowd, even when the crowd is doing something incredibly, ridiculously stupid. You know, one of the things I so love about the new Star Wars movies is that we've got a stormtrooper who takes off his stormtrooper garb, and turns out he's got a personality and a life, and he can think for himself. Well, way back in the very first Star Wars movie, there's a classic scene in which Luke and Obi-Wan are trying to take the droids, C-3PO and R2-D2, and get them out of town, out of wherever they are. And they're stopped by the stormtroopers. You remember this. And this is one of the first opportunities for Obi-Wan to actually use his Jedi mind tricks. And I love Jedi mind tricks. It's not only a great band, but it's also a pretty good way of thinking about the world. And you remember what he does. He basically says to the stormtrooper, "These are not the droids you're looking for." And the stormtrooper says, "These are not the droids we're looking for." And then he says, "Move along." And the stormtrooper says, "Move along, move along." It's great, isn't it? Right? Well, here's the thing. Most bar takers follow the crowd. They're stormtroopers. Must do IRAC, must memorize, must take big box bar review, must buy, XYZ supplemental course, must do this, must do that. But you're not that person. No. You've got the Jedi mind trick. You can simply go, "The droid you're looking for? No, these are not the droids you're looking for. I can do something different. I don't have to follow the crowd. I can make my own decisions." You see, you're smarter than the stormtroopers who are susceptible to the Jedi mind tricks. You don't have to fall into that. I would tell you that the marketing money that's spent in the bar review industry is the equivalent, of Jedi mind tricks. This is simply designed to make you believe things that simply are not true. You've been taught to believe, most of you, that you should cram, you should memorize, and you should recite. That is a mind trick. It is not true. There's no empirical evidence. There's no evidence anywhere to that effect. And yet I hear it robotically spoken day after day, week after week, year after year. But you heard differently. You snapped out of the trance. You were not someone who was susceptible to the mind trick. And you heard differently that there's a different way of approaching this. Remember, rebellions are built on hope. You've got hope. You've got something that you're doing that's different. It's going to give you a different result. Isn't that the best news you could possibly get when you're feeling the frustration and discouragement of the bar exam? at these point before the test. So if you're feeling down, this weekend, pick up a Star Wars movie or go to see one. They're always great. They're always great. And think to yourself, which side do I want to be on? The dark side, or do I want the power of the Force?